very happy to share my little treasures with you. This isn't all of them. This is a sample. I grew up approximately 5 miles north of here in Oakville, but a half a mile from the Mississippi. So in 1966, we moved from High Ridge to Oakville, and at that time it was nothing but truck farms. And I was walking to school, Point School, in 4th grade, through the farmer's field, and I found my very first arrowhead. And from that moment on, I became a semi-addict. I would put it on my bed, by my bed, and just look at it and think about the person who made it, what he used it for, what they used it for. And I became smitten with archaeology. And in high school, by the time I got to high school, I had a big shoebox full of arrowheads, and I was at Oakville Senior High. And I took an archaeology class in sophomore year, and I took that shoebox to school, and I left it at school, and it disappeared. And so it was, sort of a tragedy, but it taught me a lesson, and that is, it's really fun to find arrowheads. I don't really care owning them's kind of a hassle for me. Because then you have to kind of care for them. And so, but the obsession, we have my wife and I, some of you know I was married for 10 years when the boat was, threatening, and I left that. But on and off, I would, when we had time, go back into wandering creeks and fields and finding arrowheads, and I became, I would call a semi-pro professional amateur. So I read some about it. I don't have an extensive collection because I have over the years often given them away to get people kind of interested in it. And Nancy always says, "Why do you give them away?" So she's in the back, my better half, who tolerates my absences on Sunday afternoon. Anyway, so what's remarkable about my collection here, for the most part, everything you see here, I think there's 2 that aren't from right here. But everything that you see on this table is from walking distance of here. And this, I have pottery, and I brought some, there's a tremendous amount of fossil stuff around here too. And these are all from right here too. So I brought a sampling of those because I can't walk by them and leave them lay. And of course, most of you know about the Jimmy Carter law. You know about that? Most arrowhead, you can't go digging for arrowheads, but you could, thanks to Jimmy Carter, the Cultural Preservation Act that was passed in the 70s while he was president, he wouldn't sign it. He had such fond memories of walking through his family farm in Georgia that he would not sign the law unless there was a provision to prevent people from doing surface finds. So you can't dig, but you can find things on the ground and own them. Some states are different. Missouri's quite liberal for surface finds. But in any case, what is remarkable about what I have found here, I brought this diagram. One of my sons got this and framed it for me for Christmas one year. And this is a really good representation of the dates. And what's remarkable about the collection that I have found right here is that I have found almost every one of these in this type. And when you start reading, even though these are from different areas, and I don't know, has anybody ever found an arrowhead or looked for one? You have? You have, Lee. Anybody else? Yeah. So they're named typically after where they're found. So you might be surprised to know that there's an Afton arrowhead, and it's in all the books. There's a Clovis, of course, Clovis, New Mexico. That's very common or very widely known. There's a St. Charles. There's a Sedalia. There's a Table Rock. And all these are named after where that kind of feature was originally found. So this is a Table Rock that I found this year, actually. And it's a couple thousand years old. And So I think that's what when you start reading, and I started late in life, I started reading these journals about, you know, there's all kinds of material that you can read up about. And what you find in this little area of Missouri, and I have looked at this in dozens of different academic papers, this area is kind of on the convergence of multiple cultures that overlap right here. So there's the Hopewell culture. There's 4 different versions of it, and that's a time period and a time, you know, they date and
this is all prehistoric.
it's all prehistoric, it's all pre-European history. Lithic, they call it, or, you know, the big categories are Paleo, Archaic. Archaic is mid, late, middle, and early. Mississippian, what's the other one I'm missing? Anyway, what they do is professional archaeologists categorize these things and then they date them. And so the cultures that they classify according to date and range had certain characteristics about their tools, what they did, whether they're hunter-gatherers, did they cultivate ground, which was very late. Most artifacts were really hunter-gatherers. And in any case, when you start kind of studying this area, you'll see that the Paleo time had different eras in it. They can subdivide it into the Dalton and Clovis periods. Hopewell had different times, Grant Cave, all those things in these different areas. For some reason, this area is overlapped in many different eras between cultures. So I think that it helps explain why you can find here so many different, there's other reasons too. The Indians were very, they traded and raided. So when they were getting fights, they would take all their artifacts and use them. So I often wondered when I'm wandering around the local area, you know, how they got here. Recently, and you guys can come up and I'll stop talking pretty soon. This is another this year find. It's a pipe. It's called a calumet pipe, and this would have had like a hollow stem attached to it. And I never expected to find one. I knew people who had found one, and I was telling Lee earlier, I never had gone to an Indian artifact show until this year. And when I got there, I had found this like 2 weeks before, and I was just stunned by it. When I got to this Indian artifact show, they had whole displays of them, and so I learned a lot about it real quickly. The other unusual, I would say this is unusual, this is an ocean shell from the ocean. They don't come around here, but it's carved. It has, and I say I haven't gone to an artifact show, but I have gone to Cahokia Mounds, that cultural museum, and they have these there too. So this is definitely from the Cahokia culture. And it's
the little holes that are drilled in.
There's little holes and there's these little notches on the side. They were used to attach it to like a shoulder. It was an ornament for something. And this, right next to it, is the Cahokia points are quite distinctive. And they have a double notch. And this one was found right here. And it's a little bird arrow. And it has the typical characteristic double notch. And so they call this a Cahokia point. There's various versions of the Cahokia points too. This is another relatively recent find. This is called a plummet. They don't really know what they use them for, but it's made out of hematite. And I've been told, and I didn't see it at this Indian artifact show, but I have some people, some buddies that would go to artifact shows all the time, and you could trade hematite. It's all over the Mississippi River because the railroad used it to shore the bank up. So, but apparently, people who hunt arrowheads, they don't have hematite coming out their ears like we do in Missouri. So you can take like a bucket of hematite over and trade it. They say it, so I didn't do it, but this is made of hematite. I'll pass it around. Try not to drop it.
Right.
But it's quite heavy, and hematite is like 77% metal or iron. And the symmetry of that, to think how, it's about 4,000 years old, they suspect. And to think how they did that, with stone tools is really fascinating. And the symmetry is really proportioned well. Also, this came from, but you never tell where you find stuff, but I can tell you every piece of this pottery right here, and it represents multiple years of the development of pottery. So the original pottery that early primitive Native Americans made was quite thick and heavy. So there is some older, and that represents the older pottery. Later on, they would put shells in it from mussels. They would grind shells, and you can quite clearly see the shells in this, and so it enabled them to build lighter, thinner pottery. And they fired it. This is a piece of pottery, also from the river, that was probably a jug handle. So somebody was taking a snort. I'm always expecting, one day I think I'm going to find something from the Lewis and Clark, because they were here in 1803, December 6th. They made a note, Clark made a note in his journal of the settlement at the Little Rock Creek. And I always think, well, how would I know if I found something that they threw over the edge of the boat? It'd be neat to know. Yeah, right. I'll call it that.
There you go.
So what else is here? I also have some pictures that I'll pass around of some of the other artifacts that I have that I didn't bring tonight. I think I brought it. But does anybody have any questions so far? Or?
Have you ever found a drill?
I have not found a drill yet, but I've been with a couple of buddies that have found drills when I was with them. And so this is a picture that I took a couple of years ago, and this is Rock Creek when it's really rock. So most of the time it's full of mud, but this was in the winter.
Let these passed around?
Yeah, pass around. This one's kind of hard to see, but the river, if you walk this river much, between fall and spring, it can change. I've been here 30-some years, 35 years now. Actually, I moved here in 81, so whatever that is. Places where there's a rock bank this spring could be under this much mud next year, and it changes. And so I often wonder when I'm strolling along, well, why did they like this place? So these are some of the pictures of how I found artifacts along the riverbank, and some of them, even a blind squirrel finds a nut now and then. You can pass those around.
Okay, you have to have a good eye, though. You have to have a good eye.
I'll tell you what else I found. Does anybody remember a guy named Christian Herder? His family grew up down Iron Mountain Bluff in Arnold, and he died a few years ago. But he had an undergraduate degree in archaeology from SLU, and his dad was Art Herder. He was an attorney.
Okay.
And, remember?
I don't know. I knew the mom and dad.
Cynthia. So Christian was a wonderful guy. By the time he was 30, he was the, and they wouldn't mind me telling his story because I did his funeral. By 30 years old, he was a vice president for Morgan Stanley. And he had a boat up in Kennebunkport, Maine, and he went over a big wave and he hurt his back. And he became addicted to Oxycontin. And it was a train wreck. And ultimately they cut him off and he got addicted to heroin. And so his mom, I didn't know him growing up, but he grew up close to, this neighborhood. And his mom came to me, got bigger, that's what would hold it onto the end of the thing, and they would use it when they were cultivated. The other thing I found recently, I found it multiple times in the last 20 years. They grew squash and corn and green beans together, and they called them the three sisters. They would plant them together, and the string beans would grow up on the corn, and they would shadow the melons to keep the sun from drying out the soil. And I found, I think, volunteer or wild green beans growing along the banks of the Mississippi pretty frequently, which I always think, well, is that still being reseeded?
There was some little tiny corn growing in fields around here where the ears were like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a fun thing. This one right here, and I can't remember exactly where I find these. It's a weird problem I have, I guess. I can't remember what I did last week, but I can remember where I was when I found this. But this is called a paleo square knife. And when I went to that artifact show, I actually saw lots of everything on this table except this. There was only one display of these paleo square knives. And I thought, well, that must be saying something, because it's quite thin. It's clearly so this could be like 8,000. This artifact here is probably 10,000 years old. And everybody says this is the find of a lifetime. And I sent you the pictures. If you look at this, I think I brought it. Oh, maybe I didn't bring it. Well, I have a picture of the day I found that. And, oh, no, that's not it. I must not have brought it. But it was after the floodwaters receded, so it was uncovered. It had been very protected because it's not polished like that Adena blade that's going around. It's still quite visible, the tool marks. So, yes?
What's the oldest piece that you have?
Probably this piece right here. This it's called either a Dalton or an Allen or a Plainview or a Clovis, a non-fluted Clovis, but they date them 10 to 12,000 years old. And, I mean, if you look at this document, this one has Sloan Dalton in the 7,500 BC range, which is 9,500 years. This one, which also looks like it, it's hard to tell them apart because that's not far off that.
Can you hold that while I take a picture of it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So there's a paleo square knife too.
Here you go.
Yeah. So hard to say, but it's remarkable that anything lasts, that long, I think. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you.